Welcome to the ChangeMakers podcast, produced by City Current and powered by Higginbotham Insurance and Financial Services.
This show shares personal stories and insight from those who are leading by example, fueling positive change and making a difference so we can learn and do the same.
We cover life lessons, business advice, passion, and purpose.
Now here's your host, Jeremy Park.
Higginbotham Insurance and Financial Services is proud to power the ChangeMakers podcast. We're a people-first company that protects what matters most, the families, businesses, and trailblazers that keep our community going. As one of the nation's top independent insurance firms, Higginbotham is a single-source solution for business insurance, employee benefits, HR services, and personal insurance that's customized for you. We're here to serve you, the people you care about, and your community. Call 866-377-1959 or visit higginbotham.com.
Welcome to the ChangeMakers podcast, produced by City Current, powered by Higginbotham. I'm your host, Jeremy Park, and on this episode, we're diving into career trajectory, resume building, getting the most out of your life and career, and enjoying Mondays. And that's why we're excited to be with Tammy Alvarez, CEO and founder of Career Winner Circle and author of Escaping the Career Trap. Transform your apathy into ambition and never hate Mondays again. Tammy, how are you doing?
I am great, Jeremy. Thank you so much for the invite, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. Thanks for the intro.
Absolutely. So we'll talk all about the book. We'll talk about your career and lessons learned, but let's start out with a little bit of just where you grew up. So tell us about your childhood and where you grew up.
Okay. So I grew up in a very small rural community in northern New Jersey, right outside of New York City. There were more dairy cows than people in the neighborhood that I grew up in. And so very, blue collar family, no one ever went to college, very farming town and whatnot. And so that's really where I grew up. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. It was a great place to grow up. But as soon as I was 18, I'm like, boom, I'm out. Let's move on to new adventures. And what I decided to do, because my parents were poor and I had no ambition, is I didn't go to college right after high school. I decided, I'm going to go work for a year or two, get my act together, figure out what I want to do for a living, and then go. And then I kept getting promoted every year and a half or so, and then started a family. So I didn't get my college degree until the ripe young age of 40. But so, yeah, my growing up was very much not at all what my adult life turned into be. And I don't think that's an accident.
Well, when you look back, though, and obviously we'll talk about your career and especially Wall Street, finance, things like that. When you look at kind of the idea of numbers, commerce, where did that start to filter in? Was that always there? Was that something that kind of developed a little bit later on? How did that?
No, I hated that, and I'm not a numbers person at all. I don't think letters and numbers should be together. I think it's unnatural, but I'm thankful for people who do. That's where all the tech and all the science comes from. So really, where my career, and in the book we talk about having an accidental career, and I think most of us have that, where you start somewhere. We all start somewhere, and then it rolls into something else, and you've got opportunities, and you either take them or you don't, and then before you know it, you're halfway or 2/3 of the way through, you're like, that wasn't what I planned, because I didn't have a plan, and those types of things. So really, where my skill set was really most strong is in the ability to read people, to motivate people, to understand what made them tick and what they really wanted for themselves. And then to find a way through the work I needed to do to get them what they wanted as well, so everyone was able to win. Too many times, I think, in corporate, the mentality of someone has to lose in order for me to win sits heavy, and it turns into this unnecessary cage. And so my natural talents really lied in that collaboration. And I just happened to land in financial services and around financial services because of New York City. And that's where those skills really started to come in.
When you look back and, kind of more of a rural setting, were there some things, though, that really have played out that you learned at an early age? And I'm thinking around like character and just work ethic, things that you've been able to carry with you as you look back?
Massive defining moments growing up. So when I was about 15, my parents had split up. And, we were we never felt poor. I didn't even know we were poor until later. Like, we always had a house and a pool and, all these things. But when I was 15, my parents split up. It wasn't a big deal for me. I was a very rebellious child. So with my dad out of my way, I could have a little more fun. So, it was all working out pretty well for me. My poor mom was on the struggle bus for sure. But what happened is he disappeared. And within a month, we were homeless. And so the mortgage was never paid. The IRS was after my mom for back taxes for almost 10 years of not paying taxes. All of these things. Now, my mother got pregnant with me in high school. And so she didn't have a college degree or a high school diploma, rather. And so she was trying to support 2 children in a small town where, it was absolutely devastating to watch and to experience, both for my mom, my sister, and myself. And so, at 15, it's such an impressible time, too. Girls are meet in high school. Like, I did everything I could to try and make it not seem that way. And so that was a really defining moment for me, in that I saw my mother struggle, and I swore that would never be me, that I would never be put in that, because I was a very small town mindset, didn't travel, we would go see family in different states, but none of that was part of my upbringing. And, we would go down south for the winter, and see relatives and stuff. And I thought it was a big holiday. No, it's because my dad, didn't have the money for us to be able to continue to live up here. So we had to go with all of our relatives. And I didn't know that. And so learning all of these things as an adult, but experiencing it as a teenager, I had this hyper ambition and drive to make sure that I was never in that type of situation where I would have to struggle like my mom did. And that's really where I think a lot of my drive and perspective has come from. Is, yep, I did not come through my career in traditional ways like everybody else does, but I had this fuel behind me to make sure that I was always, in control and always continuing to grow and progress.
When you look at your mother, what's a tradition or something that, kind of stands out to you as a special either, bonding experience or a moment or something, especially with your mom now as you look back and, obviously what she was able to pour in and do and what that means to you now? Are there any kind of special moments or memories or traditions there?
Yeah, I think one of the special moments is the quiet strength she had, right? I'm an extrovert. I'm very out there, and that's just who I am. And when I was younger, I looked at that as almost a weakness. But when I, in hindsight, look back and I'm like, oh, all the things that she was able to accomplish and persevere through, and with all the lack of resources that she had, because you have a lot of resources at her disposal. And there was always this stoic calm. Like, it was never panic. It was never the sky is falling. It was always, there's a way forward. We'll figure it out. Things suck right now, but there's a way forward. And I think that's really what instilled in me. It's like, nothing ever goes as you plan it to go. And life is always going to throw these curveballs at you. Some are boulders, some are pebbles, but you're always going to get something that's in your way. And, the quiet resolve that she had, I think was one of the things that, had always resonated with me as I became an adult and had the benefit of hindsight, and just that persistence of being there as a family. We always had family dinners and, all that kind of fun stuff. And you always had that home base to come back to. And she got my butt out of trouble with my dad all the time, right? My dad was very, very heavy-handed. I do something wrong, I get punished for a really long time. And, that obviously would never hold while he was working. So she always backed me up on that too, in terms of understanding my rebellious spirit and not making me pay too much for it.
The unconditional love of a mother. But I think
that's it.
The calm and the chaos is a really important thing, especially to see that at a young age, going through what you experienced. But to see her have the calm, reserve, and obviously internally, she's probably going 100 miles.
Hot mess. Absolutely. Yeah.
Portraying that calm so that you as a child don't feel overwhelmed and can, sit in the moment too. I think that's a really important lesson, that applies obviously to business, but it also applies just to parenting.
Yeah. Life in general, right?
Yeah, life in general. Yeah. Exactly. So walk us through, because obviously, as you said, you can't get out fast enough. You kind of fall into a career path that you weren't necessarily expecting. Go ahead and start painting the picture of transitioning into kind of the corporate ladder that you were able to climb.
Yeah, absolutely. And so my first role in, my first big girl job was as a recruiter for Manpower, which is a temporary services agency. And it was the light industrial. So I would go out to warehouses and stuff and figure out how many they needed. And then we'd have an arsenal of people that we would put out there. And it was an interesting job because I had no idea what I was doing. They took a chance on me. And I think that is ultimately, I think, the theme and the common thread throughout my success has been the fortune of being with leaders who saw more in me than I did. I was always that small town girl coming from a dairy farm, not educated, not well-traveled, very, very, brazen and high risk tolerance, but not a lot to draw on, in terms of my own abilities. So every time I had an opportunity, I was in over my skis. I felt like I was definitely the poster child for imposter syndrome before it was a thing. But these people, these leaders, they believed in me. And because I had the drive and ambition of knowing what not to be, and because I felt like I had nothing to lose, like no one expected anything. I didn't have parents sitting here thinking you're going to go to college and be a doctor. So I didn't have that pressure. So anything I achieved beyond, being at the checkout counter at our local A&P was like a massive win. And so I just didn't have those same restrictions and constructs of I've got to do this or I need to be that. What I did have is that drive, to make an impact, to be self-sufficient and to continue to grow. And so when I was at Manpower, the Marty Klein, I'll never forget him. He was the owner of the franchise in that area. I was in the Southeast New Jersey, Philadelphia area. And he kept giving me new things. Like at the time, technology was new, right? Secretaries used typewriters, and I'm dating myself, but this is what it is. And so when computers started to come around and things like that. And so whenever we started a new division or whenever we started a new, function, like that was the thing he put me on. And I was 15 to 20 years younger than my peers, but I didn't have any fear and I was naturally collaborative. And so being able to do that was really a big stepping stone. And so as I started to do that and then moved into the tech specific area during the .com Y2K craziness, and then that was in New York and that moved me into corporate in Wall Street. And the reason it was doing that is because eventually what my whole career was founded on, and my whole life basically, is if you don't like it, change it. You make the rules for yourself. And if something isn't to your liking, then it's up to you to change it instead of sit there and complain about it or wait for somebody else to do it for you. And so I made a lot of moves. I, pivoted laterally, moved up, got fired a couple times, all the fun things. And, but I found myself ultimately in a corporate role because, and I'd never done this before. I was always on the other side. I was on the outside looking at professional services. But a client of mine from Bank of America, which is where I started my corporate career, he saw something that I had that he needed. And he needed to centralize an organization to have more of a consulting mindset instead of a decentralized organization. And so I'm like, I don't know anything about this. It was technology infrastructure. I've never been on the inside. It was a big job. And I'm like, I do not belong here. My first job there was to reorg a team of 5,000 people. I was like, okay, well, let's do it. And so I kept finding myself in these big, scary situations, terrified, but continuing to move forward, make mistakes, and recover. And in my corporate career, I think the biggest thing I learned, which continued to help me grow, is I wasn't afraid of failure. And again, I didn't know why, but now as I coach my clients, and you'll read about in the book, is that the thing that I think that holds leaders back the most is the fear of failure. And not realizing that failure is a part of success. And you can't have one without the other. So if you avoid failure, you're avoiding success. And I always had this experimental mindset, like nothing was all success or all failure. There was always a blend. So let's keep the stuff that works. Let's get rid of the stuff that got my clock clinged on and try something new. And so that mindset really helped me move ultimately to the point where I was managing 2,000 people across 35 countries and solving some of the biggest problems in the financial services industry. And I absolutely loved it. I ultimately was a C-level executive. And so I think it's the grassroots of I've got nothing to lose and I've got everything, motivating me to having really, really good mentors that saw more in me than I saw in myself. And then having that fearless approach in terms of failure does not define me. That ultimately helped, drive me through my corporate career.
Yeah, and I think even going back to your childhood, being humble and hungry, right? Willing to earn, but nothing to lose and saying, I don't have an ego in this in terms of like all these degrees and things. Like, I got to go and I want to earn it and learn it, and I want to pour in because I'm hungry and I'm determined. And I think that mindset really has paved the way. Going back to Marty, I'm curious, were you raising your hand saying, hey, I want to do more, I want to take on more, pick me, put me in, coach, like I want to be involved? Or was it him genuinely kind of noticing and saying, hey, I want you to do this, or would you be willing to do this? Because I think that's where some people struggle around taking the initiative and saying, hey, I want to take on more versus, no, I don't want to take on more. And someone just is going to keep giving me stuff. But I think, for those who have ambition, saying, hey, I want to be a part of it. I want to collaborate. I want to be a part of the team. That's a really easy way to start standing out and start putting yourself in a new direction to learn more. Where was that on your equation?
So how this showed up for me is I didn't know any better, right? So sometimes ignorance is bliss. And I'd see things that made no sense, or I'd see opportunities that we weren't taking advantage of. And so instead of pick me, it was more of a question of, why are we doing it this way? Wouldn't it make more sense if, or, my clients, I'm hearing this from my clients, we don't have anything to really offer them in the areas that their needs are coming into. And so by bringing up the business needs and calling BS on the things that made no sense, again, because I didn't know any better, that gave me the visibility in terms of being at the table for the conversation, right? And of course, I didn't ever volunteer for anything because I didn't think I belonged there in the first place. So I wasn't going to be like, oh, this is a hot mess, I'll do it. But Mari's like, are you willing to give this a try? I'm like, sure, I'll give it a try. And I never did it alone. No one ever alone. And so because I was willing to try new things and kind of be that point at the arrow and take the hits when things didn't go well and share the credit when things did, my peers were amazing partners in that, okay, we've got to do this. It's impacting the entire region that we're working in. What are you hearing from your clients? What do you need? How can I make this a win for you? And deliver over and over and over again. And that's really when you start to get that street cred, is when you're making everyone else's situation better, because when you do that, you will automatically continue to, versus being more self-serving and say, oh, this is me and I want this for me. Look at me. And I just never had that approach, at least early in my career. Later in my career, when I actually knew what I was doing, then that was a different story in terms of, this is a hot mess. We need to fix it. No one else has the courage to do it. I'll take it and we'll go from there. So, but early days, it was a blend of those two things.
Yeah, very helpful. When you look at the Bank of America and that experience, what's a lesson that stands out, something that impacted you? Obviously, there was a lot there, but when you step in, look at, the reorganization and 5,000, like all of that, what's something that stands out to you that made you stronger?
A few things, actually. I had never done anything to scale before to that level. And had no idea, because I'd been on the consulting side for so long that I actually had to eat my own dog. And, because usually we'll consult, we'll do this, and then we're out, right? And leave our clients to deal with the rest. And so using some of the techniques that we had left behind for our clients and actually running that operationally, I was like, this is a hot mess. We shouldn't be doing this. But I didn't have an appreciation for the nuances of the complexity of large business. So like you just tweak one tiny little thing that you don't even think about in terms of process design or organizational structure, and you have now massively impacted thousands of people downstream in a major way, unintentional. And so not having, the 360-degree view around what you're doing, the stakeholders, the inputs, the outputs, all that kind of fun stuff, not having a strong command of that, you can screw things up in a big way. And I think that was probably the biggest lesson that I learned, is to slow down to move faster. And the more you slow down to really understand the ecosystem that you're working within, and the personalities that you're working within, because on Wall Street, there's a few of those, to be able to collaborate effectively, those are my two big moments, in terms of being able to grow and thrive with a lot of battle scars to get there ultimately in the end.
So obviously all this starts to pave the way for Career Winner Circle. Go ahead and talk about the pivot on your end and Career Winner Circle.
Absolutely. And so we're here about 15 years before we're supposed to be. And I always thought like, okay, my soft retirement, I'll coach and sit on boards and just do those kind of things to keep myself relevant. And then, as I mentioned before, in times of my career, I've always been ambitious, but I've always been like, if you don't like it, change it. And I remember this defining moment, and we talk about it in the book too, in terms of we're sitting in a boardroom, it's the end of the quarter, we got our clocks cleaned again, and the analyst just ripped us to shreds, right, during the earnings call. And that happened every quarter because we usually never made earnings. And so, but from that standpoint, like the jockeying for position, whose fault is it? Like all of the politicking that goes on behind closed doors usually was fun for me. That was a game. It was fodder. And this one time, I remember I had this feeling like I was rising above the table. You know, like in the movies where you have those out-of-body experiences where you can see everything that's going on, but you're really not there. That's kind of how it felt. And I finally had this giant case of I don't give a shitis. Like, I just didn't care anymore. I stopped, and I couldn't find anything to be excited about. Usually, if it wasn't the work, it was the people. If it wasn't that, it was my personal growth. And I had just run out of steam for what I was doing in terms of passion. And so timing was right in terms of my life. My daughter was graduating college. She was off payroll. You know, things were kind of winding down with my big fancy apartment in New York in terms of renewing. And so I decided to cash out of Wall Street. I moved to a tropical island off the coast of Belize in Central America and started this coaching business. And that was about 6 years ago. And today we're sitting here with 7 coaches. We're serving companies around the world and individuals. And it was quite an experience because I had no idea how to be an entrepreneur. I could manage big teams. I could do all that. But I made every mistake you could possibly imagine, as I was trying to figure out how to create a viable business and not just, a commercially viable side hustle.
Well, part of keeping it exciting is diving in. And just like you said, the fear of failure, just, okay, we're going to push this aside. We're going to dive in and we're going to figure it out and we're going to make it work one way or the other. And so,
I know that my fear was a little bigger when it was my own money I was spending, right? All of a sudden, fearlessness definitely, I'm like, that was an expensive mistake. I don't want to do that one again, right? So it is interesting. So the question about why the book and why I wrote the book. The book is a culmination of not just my background and my story, but also stories from about 30 other people, whether they're other coaches and consultants that have come through corporate or my clients, who we made anonymous for obvious reasons. But it's their stories and how they found their way out of the career trap and how they found their way to really not just at a one time having a thriving career, but to continue on that path. And the reason I did it now is really twofold. One, we've expanded the business, right? So we've got 7 coaches on the team. We're continuing to grow. And, I had the freedom and the time to finally get it out, because I do a little bit less coaching now and a lot more helping them with their business and growing the business. But also from a timing perspective, like there's so much negativity out there right now. And there's so much fear mongering, and coming off of COVID, and then everybody can work from home forever. And no one can work from home ever again. And all of the chaos and the quiet quitting and the quiet firing and all the craziness, like now more than ever, I think we need to reach more people. There's only so many people that can find us, and work with us privately. And this was a great opportunity to get those messages out, to get the stories out, to get the tactics out to a broader range of people, because it is very much a coaching book in terms of it's not just high level esoteric crap. It is do this, then that. Right? And then take the next step. And here's what you do. So this is coming from the coaching practice. We have a thing that I call brain can. And so after every chapter, there's things that I want you to reflect on and take action on, because that's really where the magic happens, is when you start to do. But I just think that there's just so many people who find such a lack of fulfillment in their career. And the career trap, I was like, what is the career trap? If you wake up on Monday mornings not excited to do what you're doing, and you're not actively taking steps to change that, or you don't know how, you are stuck in that career trap. And, so many people get that pit in their stomach on Sunday nights. It's like, oh, I can't believe I have to do this again. And so if you're not waking up fired up about doing what you're doing, you should be. And it's not a myth, and people are doing it every day. And so that's really why I wrote the book, is really to support, and get the word out about how to do this successfully, without having to have these massive skills in terms of influence or anything else that goes along with it, to really write a new chapter for yourself and for your career.
You have the book with you. So for those who are able to watch it on screen, go ahead and hold it up. So
Glamour shot.
There you go.
And you see the big golden handcuffs there, right? So, yeah.
I was about to say, I mean, the golden handcuffs, you hear that as a term, but that's a very real thing in the sense that you get trapped because you start making money, a decent amount of money to fulfill a certain lifestyle. And then you realize, well, to pay all the bills, to pay the mortgage, to have the cars, to take the trips, to do the things that we enjoy, I have to maintain this level of salary and compensation and dividends and all these things that play into it, stock options and all that. And so before you know it, you're 10 years in, 20 years in, 30 years in, you've built up this, but you may not be happy and you ain't waking up on Mondays. And that's a very real thing I think that many are facing on, okay, I'm living this sort of lifestyle, but for me to transition to happiness, that's going to take a lot of sacrifice. And I don't know that I'm willing to make that sacrifice. I'll let you kind of start, taking it wherever you want to. You have these kind of questions, out of the book. How do you start to kind of guide someone in the right direction?
Yeah. And so that is one of the things we cover in the books. I hear this all the time, Jeremy. We immediately move into this scarcity mindset when we think about making a change. And, yes, you get to a certain point. Like most of the clients, we service a bunch of clients, from leadership development to career strategy in really all spectrums of where their career is. But where I spend most of my time coaching are mid to senior level leaders, right, who are making tons of money, have houses, spouses, ex-spouses, kids in college, and they can't sell everything and live in a yurt. And so the one thing that holds most people back is they assume that if I do something that makes me happy, I have to give up something. And that drives me nuts because that is the biggest lie that we tell ourselves. Because when you understand what lights you up, when you understand out of your career, what are the things that you could do for 12 hours a day and never get tired? And when you start to lean in on those strengths and you start to make that transition from getting paid for what you do to getting paid for what you know, now you're making a different role that you're energized by, where you make a big impact and you're making more money.
Give us one other kind of teaser from the book in terms of, one of your favorite bits of advice, recommendations, brain candy. What's another teaser from the book?
So the other thing you're going to learn when you read the book and you do what's in the book, right? Reading is great. Taking action on what you learn is really what this is about. But we talk about how you become the CEO of your career, because we have such a personal connection to what we do for a living, especially Americans, right? So we associate who we are with what we do, how much we make, who we work for, and what our title is. And especially on Wall Street, we always, shake people down that way in terms of trying to understand what they're about versus what do you love to do when you're not working. We never talk about that. And so we have such a high sense of connection to that. Now, when we look at a company, when you think about how they purchase anything, whether it's a paperclip or an executive, right, this same decision-making process follows. What is the best value for money I can get? Right? It's not always the cheapest. It's not always the most expensive, but where is that value for money? That's not personal. It's how they stay in business. But we don't take the same approach with our careers because it almost feels like, and I talk about this in the book, that you're in a one-way relationship where you're that clingy girlfriend, right? That, that the guy's not so interested in. And so when you start to treat your career like a business, and when you promote yourself to become that CEO of your career, everything changes. And you start to show up differently. And when you think about what does a CEO do? They create a vision, they build a strategy, they create the path forward to get there. They make decisions and adjust on the fly as conditions change. They've got great products and services, and they have a hell of a sales team. And if you start to look at your career like that, which no one does, and start to manage it that way, then you start to make better decisions for yourself. And I think one of the biggest examples we talk about in the book is the luxury or the benefit of being able to be recognized for your work. So you get to do all this extra work. You get to manage all these extra people for no more money and no title change. But, they're recognizing you, so you should be thankful. No, you shouldn't, right? Because if you were our company, you'd be like, I'd be happy to do that extra work. But that is scope creep. And so let's talk about how we're going to renegotiate the contract. And you can do this with your employers in a way that's productive, not contentious rather, and not confrontational. But you don't do it because you've got this emotional connection to your role. And that makes you feel like it's one-sided. And then you start to, and I don't think victim's the right word, but you just start to feel like you're not dealing from a position of strength when you really are. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we talk about in terms of one of the areas of the book is how to become that CEO of your career, so you can start, playing bigger for yourself and for those that you love.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I have a lot of people that, we've worked with throughout the years and more of like a mentorship. And, a lot of them want to get into community service, philanthropy, community engagement, CSR. And they're always like, how do I get into that? Creating volunteer experiences and all of those. And it's like, you can create those positions because a lot of companies don't necessarily have those written down as formal job descriptions and, opportunities that they're out there seeking. But if you, like you said, know your value, know your strengths, know what you bring to the table, and also can package that in the sense of, hey, I can get media exposure over here and how this volunteerism leads to more engaged employees, happier, more productive employees. And look how we can combine these. And I'm willing to lead these efforts. And if you combine, these different 3 roles, which I'm good at these 3 things, together, individually, they would be this price point, but together I can knock down the price point to 100,000 versus 150. And we've got ourselves a great deal. And, but it comes back to knowing your value, knowing your strengths and what you can bring to the table. And then how, like you said, it will benefit the company, because at the end of the day, everyone really is running a business individually and corporately. And so I think that's a really interesting thing is the creativity, the entrepreneurialism around it, but also too, the strength of doing an audit to understand, what your value is and being able to identify and kind of put a number to that. And even when you talk about career mobility inside a company, knowing what value you bring allows you to then have those conversations around raising your salary, increasing your responsibility, all of those, which a lot of people don't ever really look around and say, okay, what really am I bringing and what am I capable of bringing to an organization?
Yeah, you do not, first of all, you should be able to quantify monetarily the value that you deliver, for sure. And that's also in the book, right? So in terms of how to do that, if you're in sales, it's easy. Like how much revenue did you bring in? But the further you get away from the customer, the harder that becomes. But it's still possible. And we talk about the methods that you are able to do that, because once you know that, then you start to get that confidence to say, hang on a second, I know that I'm delivering big for the organization and I want to continue to do that. I think the other thing that a lot of people miss is the opportunity to either grow in place or to grow laterally, and thinking that it always has to be a promotion to count. And it doesn't. So what I recommend for my clients and what I've always done is, instead of saying that I want to be this or I want this as my next step, to really look at what are those 3 areas that you want to grow in next. And what are those things you've not had an opportunity to do, to really be like, okay, this is going to help round me out, to get ready for something bigger, but it's also going to be more fun because you're learning something and contributing. But as long as you know at a high level what those 3 things are that you really want to learn and grow in, then leave yourself open to any opportunity, because those growth options can show up in the strangest of ways. I mean, having that mindset, I worked in 11 different business functions, from sales to audit and everything in between. And so to be able to shift and move through all of those things seamlessly was because I was willing to say, oh, audit sounds terrible, but I'm willing to try because there's some things here that I want to learn, and this is an opportunity for me to do that. So I think changing that mindset in terms of it has to be a promotion to count versus where can I grow and what's the most important areas for me to grow in, I think are really important things for our listeners to think about as they're trying to figure out what their next move might be.
Writing a book can be extremely self-reflective and soul-searching. And, when you look at that process of writing a book, were there any aha moments for you or ways that, once you finish, you're like, I'm going to change the way I kind of go about things? Or in other words, did writing the book change any perspectives or bring to light anything on your end for you as an entrepreneur?
There's a few things that I learned, actually. This has been on my list of things to do for a couple of years. And it just seemed like last year it wasn't even on the list of things to do, but the timing was right in that, we had just brought on these coaches, so they were taking on a lot of the work. We had just made a move from Belize to Mexico City because I wanted to get back to urban life again. So I had no friends. And so we're in that beginning stage, and I'm like, oh, this is a great time for me to do this. And as we were just kind of getting adjusted into our new home. And what I realized is a couple different things. One is that this is hard. Writing a book is hard. I'm not a writer. I don't play one on TV. I have a coach. I'm an executive. I have all these things. And so the editing team has been fantastic. That was like delivering a 10-pound baby every day. So writing it for me was so easy, and it flowed so quickly because it's all the things, all the lessons. And it was a lot more fun because I included a lot of other people and their stories in it. So the people that I knew, or I thought I knew, and then you hear their journeys, you're like, oh my God, that's so cool. And so that part was really fun, and just being able to share in other people's career journeys with them. But I think the most important thing it taught me was that, going through a process like this, I had a coach because I didn't know what I was doing. And so my coach took all the overwhelm out of everything. And because he obviously is a 2-time best-selling author, all these things. And so with that, he had the playbook. So it's like, if I had to do this on my own, we still would be messing around with this thing, right? It would not be ready to go. And so I've learned early in my career, just help kind of reinforce, especially in my entrepreneurial life, that the things that are new to me, the things that are not in my wheelhouse that I need to do to grow the business, get help fast and get good help. And that really is the lesson that I've learned through the whole process in terms of the editing and the interior design. And, now I'm going into recording studios for the audiobook. I've got that this afternoon, so that'll be ready. It's like all the things that I've never done before. I'm like, okay, this will be fun. Let's see where we are. But it also helped me learn. I've always had that experimental mindset in my corporate career. But then at a certain point in time, you kind of stop learning. Like, there's no big aha moments anymore. So my entire entrepreneurial journey has been a new set of punches in the face, like, oh, I didn't know that's how that works, which took a little bit of reacclimating to. But now that I'm used to it, I love throwing myself into things that no idea what I'm doing. Let's just see what this button does and push it, and then, adjust from there once it's done. But we finally, because I wanted this to be obviously a high quality book that is full of just, good actionable information that people can use not just one time, but all the time. And we achieved that. I'm very proud about what we achieved with that.
Good stuff. Well, and it goes back, like you said, being a coach, you understand the power of having a coach. We talk about doing something to the best of your ability, making sure that you have someone who's an expert who can guide you. That is a very, very important piece of the equation for success. So this is a conversation we could have, obviously go on forever, but let's go ahead and switch over. We'll do a fun lightning round, and then we'll kind of wrap up. But short questions, short answers. What do you like to do to relax?
I love to eat and dine and cook. Food is love. So when I'm stressed, you will find me in the kitchen.
What is a go-to favorite meal to make?
All of them. Something I've never made before. That's usually where the fun for me comes in, is, finding a new thing or a new style that I've never done before and giving that a try and hunting all over the city to find the right spices and all that kind of fun stuff. So I like new things. And so, yeah, if I haven't made it before, then that's what I'd love to do.
When someone comes to visit from out of town, where do you like to take them?
We'll usually take them to the places that are more authentic, off the beaten track. We specifically moved into a neighborhood that's a beautiful neighborhood, but not English speaking. So we can really assimilate, get my Spanish to be a lot better, all that kind of fun stuff. So we'll take them to, because Mexico City is such a foodie city. And, whether it's a taco stand or whether it's a 5-star restaurant and everything in between, but as long as it's authentic and, off the beaten track, that's usually depending on what their dietary preferences are. We'll take them everything from vegan to just, massive meat fest and everything in between.
Outside of Mexico City, where do you like to travel and visit for vacation?
It's the same thing. Any place I've never been. So me and my partner, Steve, are both well-traveled. And with this business, that was part of the deal for me, is I want to be able to travel and serve my clients and grow the business. So I just got back from Vienna. We were over in the UK. So for the holiday, next month, we're heading off to the Amazon and Galapagos, to do some exploring there. And so for the two of us, because we're so well-traveled, to find places on the map that neither one of us have been, so we can explore the world together is what we do probably 4 or 5 times a year on big trips.
Outside of your passport, what's something that you have to have when you travel to that extent, like a well-traveled person? What do you like to bring as your kind of go-to things?
My laptop. This was a big thing because I closed the company for 2 weeks over the holidays. And the team was like, what do you mean you're closing? I'm like, no, we're closing. Like, none of us are going to work. But just defied logic for a bit, but they got used to it. And this was the first time, I think, in my adult life, I left and did not bring a laptop. So there's a bit of separation anxiety at first, but then I got used to it. But yeah, so that is my second go-to is definitely my laptop.
Are you a wake up early, stay up late? Where are you most productive?
Well, now that, I've, crossed the 50 mark, mornings are the better time. I used to be a night owl. And I used to tell my teams, if you want me to be at a meeting, I'll be there anytime. If you want me to contribute, don't make it before 10. And now, like, if you get me after 2, forget it, right? So now I'm a wake up, get it done in the morning, and then that way all my good thinking and my hard thinking is done for the day.
Any TV show, movie, any binge watching shows that recently are on your radar?
Not really. I don't watch a lot of TV. I read books for fun, and we'll do documentaries. I'm a documentary freak. So anything from David Attenborough, in terms of natural history and stuff like that is always interesting. I like to watch things, I think, in terms of my movie genre, dark and twisted. So, unconventional endings and weird subplots that stick with you. So those are the types of things that I like to watch in my spare time.
For you as kind of an ambassador now for Mexico City, what would you want everyone to know in terms of just the livelihood, the experience, what you've experienced so far living there?
I think the biggest thing is it's not dangerous, right? I mean, obviously it's a 22 million person city. So there are parts you don't belong in, just like Manhattan, Chicago, and any other big city. But the city, the people are really what makes the city so interesting. We had decided to go country shopping when we knew we were going to leave Belize. We wanted something more urban. So we looked at Medellin, Colombia, and Panama City, a couple other places in Mexico. And I thought the city would be too big. I didn't want to go back to the rat race of Manhattan. And like in Mexico City, the reason that as soon as my feet hit the pavement, I'm like, this is home, is because it has everything a big city has in terms of arts and culture and museums and food and all the things. But it's got a very Latin American low-key vibe. Like people actually look at you and smile and say, good morning, even if they don't know you. And there's not that angry tension that you get sometimes in big cities with people who are in such a big rush. Now, granted, we're in the nicer areas of the city, so perspective is important. But I think for people who are, afraid of all the fear-mongering that goes on, it's misplaced.
What is a favorite quote, or what is a quote or a saying that inspires you? And you don't have to get it verbatim, but what's a quote or a saying that inspires you?
Well, there's one that came out of the book from one of the contributors, and he's anonymous in the book, so I'll leave that for now as one of my clients. But he said something that I think really impacted me, and that is that change happens at the speed of trust.
I like it.
Yeah.
You're creating your legacy, obviously, every day with all the impact you're making. But many, many years from now, what do you hope that people say about you, your career, your investment in others? What do you hope that they say?
I hope they say that it was fun and made a high impact. I think we take things so seriously, right? And most of us aren't curing cancer or saving lives. And so I think to be able to lighten things up, have fun, be a little bit more pragmatic about the drama that we introduce into our lives, that's a big part of what I want people to really take away, is that just breathe, take a minute, and have fun, because everything is changeable. And so at the end, the legacy, I think, is, high impact and a lot of fun doing it.
So last question is the easiest. Where do we go to get the book? How do we start taking next steps with Career Winner Circle? So where do we go? How do we follow you? How do we reach out? How do we get involved?
Great. So for the book, you can go to Amazon, right? You can get all those things on Amazon. But if you want a really special edition, the hardcover with some free things that we also have to offer, you can also go to escapingthecareertrap.com to get a copy of the hardcover book and some other freebies that go with that. For Career Winner Circle, you can hit us up at careerwinnercircle.com. And how you engage with us is, there's a million buttons on our website for you to schedule some time. And you're going to meet with one of our coaches. You're going to have a free strategy session to talk about what's going on in your space and really where you want to take things in terms of your career, leadership skills, business. We do, a lot of entrepreneurial coaching as well. So your best place to start is there with that first conversation to see if it makes sense for us to help. And then we take things from there. And then make sure that you reach out on LinkedIn to find me, make sure you connect. Because I always like to hear from people who hear the podcast. I probably get, 3 or 4 outreaches a week. Oh, I heard you on this podcast. I really liked what you had to say or whatever. And so share your story. And I'd love to connect there as well.
Well, Tammy, you definitely are a change maker. And the book, once again, for everyone, Escaping the Career Trap, Transform Your Apathy into Ambition and Never Hate Mondays Again. So, Tammy, thank you for being a change maker. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, Jeremy. It was so much fun. Appreciate the invite.
Higginbotham Insurance and Financial Services is proud to power the ChangeMakers podcast. We're a people-first company that protects what matters most, the families, businesses, and trailblazers that keep our community going. As one of the nation's top independent insurance firms, Higginbotham is a single-source solution for business insurance, employee benefits, HR services, and personal insurance that's customized for you. We're here to serve you, the people you care about, and your community. Call 866-377-1959 or visit higginbotham.com.
Thank you for listening to the ChangeMakers podcast, produced by City Current and powered by Higginbotham Insurance and Financial Services.
To learn more, to listen to past episodes, and to share your stories of other changemakers who are making a difference, visit citycurrent.com or call 901-321-1020.
Follow the conversation online using the handle @CityCurrent or the hashtag #PowerTheGood.